Hello, everyone watching this. My name is Claire Jankelson, and I'm a director of the South African Film Festival. It is a thrill and a privilege to welcome Nobody's Died Laughing, Pieter-Dirk Uys, and award-winning actor Charlize Theron. And as we see in the film, you're both courageous social action warriors. You're both vocal advocates for HIV/AIDS education, and you're both committed to reinventing a bright future. And indeed, one of the reasons we are so proud to have you join in our festival is that the work of you both resonates deeply with our festival's commitment to a project, Education Without Borders. We call ourselves the Festival with a Conscience. Nobody's Died Laughing exquisitely shows how standing up for what one believes with humor serves to open hearts and broaden minds. And it is with our huge thanks to you both that I hand over to you, Pieter and Charlize, to consider the role of humor in all of our quests for social change.
When I hear the word humor, I always want to laugh because I'm never quite sure what it means. I think the only reason one laughs is because one would spend the rest of one's time crying. I'm very bad at jokes. I wish I could tell jokes. I always start with a punchline, which is not very successful. But the truth can always be terribly funny. And sadness has a very important balance in laughing at fear. My mother was Jewish. We only found out she was Jewish after she died, which was another extraordinary journey. Somehow I realized that the humor that she gave me was that she would laugh at the things that nobody would talk about, that she would laugh at the things that frightened her. And I think that's the one thing that's saved my life, is the fact that I will not become a victim of my fear. Nothing was funny about apartheid. Nothing was funny about HIV and AIDS. Nothing is funny about where we are today with the Northern Hemisphere on the edge of the Third World War. But the funny people are those politicians, are those people with power, are those people with the arrogance of thinking they are special, are the people that think that there are really, truly not anybody out there who might ask questions and end up by laughing at them. And I think Charlize and I share the one thing: ons praat die Afrikaanse taal, and there's nothing more rewarding than making fun of an Afrikaans politician in his own language. So I'm sorry that the film hasn't got more Afrikaans in it, because really, truly, it was terribly important for me to use Afrikaans as the key to a door that wouldn't open. And it got me into an enormous amount of fantastic trouble, publicity that money could never buy. And I'm still here. And most of those old burgers are not here anymore. And I'm so delighted to share this marvelous hug, virtual hug with Charlize, who probably, yes, is the closest to a sister that I could wish to have. Charlize, my skat, welkom, my dierbare ding.
Hi, my bookie. Yeah, I think that I somewhat knew that we were like-minded brother and sister from the time that I was little, watching you in a time and a place in South Africa talk about things that nobody, like you said, nobody was talking about. It was hush, hush. Everybody knew it. Nobody was saying it. Or if they did, it was really ugly. And you were the only person that I remember as a young child going into young adulthood that I saw on television that, to me, and I know this word gets used often in a way that feels reckless, but to me, you felt brave. You were someone, when I saw you talk about circumstance and politics and social economics and health and governments, you talked about it in a way that the only way I know how to describe it is that it felt like there was a light turned on in the room. And I had never experienced that before. Every time those subjects were kind of touched upon, it always felt like a very dark, scary room. And you were the first person in my life that made me feel like you can actually look at these things and not feel like you're completely overwhelmed by them. And then on top of that, you can laugh your ass off. Like, it's actually the funniest stuff that you can actually mine from. It was just so amazing to me. And, I felt like you were this kind of icon to me, and we didn't meet until like a little over a decade ago. But when we met, I felt like we had this thing in common, which I think a lot of South Africans have, a lot of, I think, storytellers, artists have, which is that, whether you come from a place with a lot of turmoil, or whether you come from like some turmoil in your family or abuse or alcoholism, or like that thing that I think a lot of artists kind of like try to climb out of, I felt like we looked at each other and you and I prescribed to the exact same medication, and that was laughter. And that is just, it's like, you don't have to talk about it. I just felt like when I was next to you, I was like, I know exactly how you survived, and that's how I survived.
Survival. That's a very important word to use today. Survival after 2 years of lockdown.
Yeah.
I think has changed the world, and we'll probably only find out in the next few years. The trouble with my period of lockdown was that I started falling in love with the seclusion, the Stockholm syndrome. First of all, the terrible fear of a virus that had no cure, had no name, had no face. And I didn't really know who to believe. And I suddenly realized that there was nobody to believe. But then the madness of it all, the madness of elbow. You can't shake hands. You've got to use your funny bone to knock somebody else's funny bone. And then when you have to cough, you cough in your elbow. So first you cough in your elbow, leave the germs there, and then move them to the other person. What are we talking about? I kept saying, Monty Python, are you still listening to this? And again, nothing was funny. Nothing is funny about a pandemic. But when I look at the politicians mainly, who just are beyond satire, I therefore really stand back and say to them, you're better at it than I am. I look at Donald Trump, you're better at it than I am. I look at Boris Johnson, oh, please. I couldn't make you up if I tried. So really, I think Charlize and I have to really look carefully for material, because the material has been hijacked by the people that are so powerful in their ego that they are too exhausting. And that's why I say, let us make community the jewel in the crown of democracy. The one thing that I learned in this lockdown period was the extraordinary generosity of spirit. The fact that people were talking to each other across fences, across distance, shouting. And of course, here in Darling, "Jy praat lekker hard as jy lekker praat, ne?" And so it wasn't difficult to understand that, yes, we are frightened, but I've got a little bit of food. Are you okay? And I think that's what I will carry on for the rest of my life. Yes, I would love to focus on politicians, but I haven't got time. I want to focus on the people that have managed to bring their children through 2 years of education without a school. Sometimes the parents not being able to read, and yet the child reads to the parent and the grandparent. I mean, this is something that we never had time to think about. So when it comes to humor, I think humor will enrich itself by the experience of the last 2 years. I'm so sorry that so many people will never be the same, having lost so many people they love. And I am very happy that some people like us can reinvent our alphabet to try and make it not international, but terribly local, because suddenly local is we who are still alive. And I'm very happy that our film, that Charlize and I together in our film, will be seen in Australia, will be seen in New Zealand. I think that's why the YouTube is a gift, because I've managed to put so many of my things on YouTube just to share. Oh, and one thing that I have done just in this last 2 years is I've put all my reviews together in my website. In fact, I suddenly ended up with 488 pages of a book. What ek het 'n boek geskryf? I didn't even know it. And it's called One Man Shows. And I know, Charlize, can you see the picture there? It's a picture of Boy George, but P.W. Botha, the boy from, because he comes from a town called George. And actually, that's it. And it's in the website, pdu@cu.
Wait, these are all of your reviews that you could find on your work?
It's the 7 shows I did during the apartheid years. It's called One Man Shows, the black and white years, from 1981, Adapt or Die, to 1994. And it cleaned my soul. I managed to just vomit out all those extraordinary things that I thought were lost after 40 years. I mean, as I was typing the scripts, I suddenly thought, well, why? First of all, how did I get away with it? I couldn't work that out. Secondly, why is it so familiar? I mean, the fear has not changed. 2022, the fear is still there. It's stronger because the fear breaks in the palm of your hand. It's not, you don't have to wait for breaking news. It happens here. The fake news frightens you into silence. And suddenly I realized that the hypocrisy has become much more sophisticated. The hypocrisy has become a religion. Yeah. And so anyway, it's now, first publishers. I went to a publisher and they said, well, we're not going to find buyers. And they're right. Nobody's going to spend 500 Rand buying a book that was about something that happened 40 years ago. Anyway, it's in the website. Everybody you can watch it on your laptop. Share it with your children, and the children are the ones who enjoy it. I've sent it to schools here in South Africa, mainly in the Western Cape, the schools I went to all those years ago with my HIV program. And I just said, share this with your department of drama, your department of history. Get the kids to do the sketches. Let a little girl do Winnie Mandela, as I did her in 1985, and then say, why was she in this show in 1985? Who was this P.W. Botha who looked so funny with her name? As far as I'm concerned, yes, laugh at this man. But don't forget that this man's fingerprints are on people's lives to this day. And in film, what Charlize has done has actually brought her story again into our homes, thanks to the Netflix, thanks to these extraordinary things that we can share without the fear of having to go outside and maybe catch a virus, or maybe be run over, or maybe fall. At my age, I'm very scared that I might suddenly trip up and break a hip, because there goes Evita Bezuidenhout. And also Evita Bezuidenhout has adapted, because suddenly I realized I can't do it anymore. What am I going to do now after 2 years? So I suddenly realized she hadn't been to the hairdresser during lockdown. And so she isn't a beautiful brown-headed lady. She's found that every brown cloud has a silver lining. And so she's got a very nice, short gray hair. Somebody said, she looks like Helen Mirren. And she says, no, Helen Mirren looks like me. Charlize oppas. Sy gaan lyk soos jy by een van die dae. So this actually puts it into a nutshell, the use of humor as a weapon. I would like to see the use of humor as a chocolate, as a candy floss. And in the candy floss is a blade. And once you've chewed at your candy floss, you suddenly realize that there's a bit of blood on your lips. Yep, it's sore, it's painful. And in the last few weeks or few days, we saw on international television a great actor smacking a great comedian. And there's a reason behind all those things. And maybe it makes us talk and think, can we make jokes about everything? No, but let's find a way of sharing our worry and our fears with people who are too scared to confront them. And Charlize, wat dink jy van die toekoms? I mean, looking at you, you're with your kids who are your priority. How are your family? How are you and your wonderful children?
We're all well. Thank you for asking. But I so agree with you. I feel like I had a moment too where the just being home during COVID started becoming almost so normalized, not just for me, but also for my children, that I really I think back when the AIDS epidemic started and that kind of horrible fear of not knowing, right? Which was kind of reminiscent of this in the level that we were getting misinformation and there was all this kind of, you didn't know what to believe, like you said. very different circumstances, but there was something in watching my children go through it that really made me realize that I wonder in 10 years when I asked them about this 2 years that they just had at home, how they would talk about it. Little things like the fact that they haven't seen my youngest daughter started big girl school right as COVID started. So she didn't go to school to actually physically see. She saw them on the little photo on the computer screen. They were Zooming together, but they went to school and then they all had to wear masks. So they never saw the bottom halves, and they got so used to it that now that the mandate is dropped, we have to, like, as parents, we have to remind them, like, you don't have to wear the mask. You can take the mask off. And she came home one day and she said, Mom, I feel like I'm relearning all my friends at school because I haven't seen this part of their faces in person. Gosh. And it's such a cute thing, right? But when I sat with that for a little bit, there was like a real sadness in that for me as a parent. But I loved that she found humor in it. And I hope that that's continuous. And I hope that I raise two girls who are not too thin-skinned or resilient. Because when I think of South Africans, not that they're South African, but when I think of South Africans, I think that's the quality about South Africans that I love the most. That, when you scrape your knee a couple of times, that skin gets thicker, and that's not a bad thing. Like, I want them to be able to bounce back from things, but I also want them to not be complacent in just having enough. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So and the fact that you're always walking that fine line of saying, like, that's great that you can kind of like duck off of water off a duck's back, but at the same time too, there are the right moments where you kind of go like, no, I'm not cool with this. I expect a little more. So, I think the future is going to be a balance of that. I really do. Like, I don't think we can go. The pendulum has swung for me just too far onto the other side. And if we have to do that in order to kind of correct things a little bit, I'm okay with that. But we're going to have to eventually even it out again, where we're going to have to get to a place where we can trust each other's intentions, and we can trust in good people, and we can trust that and have faith that, hopefully that somebody's not going to want to hurt you. That is a long road to take. That's, we're not close, but I'm really hoping we can get back to that place.
Well, I'm so glad that this whole project, which is about a film, about a story, about laughter, about embrace, is for children. We are raising an involvement, your life, my life. And the fact that the most important thing in my life is our little early childhood development center here in Darling. Evita's darlings, 70 kiddies every year. It's been going for 7 years. 70 lives are changed instantly. And when they leave that year of early childhood development center into education, they go into a school with other kids and they are miles ahead with humor. They laugh, they sing. It is the most important thing. And I really wish, instead of buying all those cars, we've just bought another millions and billions of rands of cars for cabinet ministers. Let service delivery start on ground zero. Let us start, and all children up to the 7th grade should have free education and humor. Anyway, listen, this is another story. I just want to say the film says a lot, and we are still here. Charlize there on that side of the world, me on this side of the world, and I think we have a telepathy. And although really, truly, we don't jump into a Zoom after 10 minutes, I don't think we've ever done a Zoom together, but we send each other little messages, soos "Hallo skatebol, ja bokkie," and that says 1,000 words. So I hope our audience in Australia, in New Zealand, also talk to each other and to their kids. Take your children, show your children. I think you can see it at home as well. Show your children. And maybe you've got a maid in the kitchen, an Afrikaans girl who couldn't get a job. She's now the maid. In Australia, there's a sketch for a review. Soos hulle sê, moenie bang wees nie, alles sal regkom.
Oh my God. I love you so much. I love you because you walk the walk. And that to me is so inspirational. You are such a prime example of everything that you believe in, that you talk about, that you teach, that you stand for. But, you know, ultimately, you live that life and you're that example. And that to me is so inspiring, because I think anybody can, you know, play the part and say the right thing and kind of like PR their way through it. But there's an authenticity that comes with how you've lived your life and your belief of all of these things, like the humor that you've brought into your life and your storytelling, that you live by example. And I just want to say thank you, my boekie. Ek is so trots op jou.
Dankie, darling.
Om jou te ken.
Dankie, my skattebol. Oh.
First thing that you said, a light turned on in the room. That is what you were for me growing up in South Africa as well. You were strength for us. You gave us the courage to keep going through it. So,
oh my God, I'm going to cry. It's so true, Claire. It's so true. It's why I want people to like see this movie. Your legacy is so important, Pieter. Like you have no idea how important your legacy is, because it transcends the kind of generational stuff, the muck that we've been in. And for you to embody this white queer man, to have been able to like transcend the way that you have, it's so rare. It's special. You're a unicorn. I hope you know that. You are a unicorn.
That's a feel.
My horingkie staan daarbo.
It's a mooi horingkie, hoor. It's a mooi horingkie.
Wonderful.
I just want to say a very, very, very huge thank you to you both for being here with us, for bringing this light to our festival, and for inspiring our audience with both of your incredible wisdom.